This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you, Nicole. So, hi everybody. Thank you for joining. My name is Anton Gorodniuk. I'm a sector analyst at SASB. I cover financial sector specifically. I've been with SASB for 5+ years, but before that, I was doing my MBA, where I was also participating in the student investment fund. Was doing stock picking, so I can speak from that perspective as well. Um, to start, probably everybody knows that the ESG investing's been kind of known to the market for decades, but it's only been in several years when it's actually kind of started becoming more mainstream, and some of the evidence can be highlighted from the PRI signatories being instead growing, and in terms of the number of large asset managers and asset owners, as well as in terms of their total assets under management. And I think a lot of that can be kind of explained by the fact that there's been many studies showing that there is actually value in integrating ESG factors in investment management from standpoint of active asset management, um, picking winners and losers. So some of the most interesting studies that have been done include that from the Harvard Business School, done by Kuhn and Seraphim, where they found that focus on material ESG information can generate risk-adjusted return. And the second paper is done by Russell Investments. And both of these papers actually use SASB framework to distill between material sustainability topics and immaterial topics and material and immaterial information. And both of them showed the fact that focusing on those topics that were defined by SASB as material for specific industries were specifically driving that outperformance. From in terms of like understanding why ESG is important from a financial standpoint, if when you do just traditional financial analysis, there are many financial drivers depending on the industry or a company. And ESG, I think it's not just about reputation, as maybe in the past was thought. It's actually linked to all of those financial drivers. It may impact cost structure, it may impact operational risks, as well as provide opportunities. And it also may impact the market share and growth opportunities for these companies. So having said that, now investors realizing this value in looking into ESG factors, that it may drive performance of their investments. There's of course a question whether the information that is available there on the market provides enough tools to investors to make informed decisions. And studies show that the survey of investors and issuers shows that there is a pretty big disconnect in satisfaction in the quality of ESG information that is available. Less than a third of investors actually saw that they're confident with the ESG data provided by companies. Although all companies thought that the sustainability reports that they publish provide good quality information for investors specifically. And I think a lot of that, and that's kind of this has been known for a few years, and it's actually why that was the main reason SASB started, that we identified this need for standardized information in sustainability specifically to give investors the tools to make informed decisions, compare companies, and in the end of the day, it will also drive better performance of the market as a whole, and of course impact the environment and the society in a positive way. And in terms of this satisfaction, something that we see as a SASB in doing our research and doing consultation with companies, we find that although when you look at from the standpoint of the disclosure on topics, most of the companies will already provide some sort of information, but unfortunately, the form in which they provide this information is absolutely not comparable. This slide just kind of shows how sometimes companies just discuss their policies. Some companies provide some quantitative information, some qualitative. Those that provide quantitative information may provide it in different metrics, different units of measure, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of information out there, but unfortunately it creates a lot of noise and prevents investors from making informed decisions. So based on that, this is kind of what SASB has identified as a problem, and the solution that we developed is coming actually from this robust process of standards development, which is we often say that our standards are created by the market for the market. And what we mean by that is that we really do a lot of rigorous research and consultation with companies, consultation with investors and subject matter experts to really start with identifying specific topics that are likely to be material for specific industries, and then dig into specific performance indicators or metrics that are likely to be most decision useful, that are likely to be carrying some forward-looking value to make sure that these indicators also link to financial drivers and would help investors make informed decisions. So in terms of our framework, you can think of this as 26 general issue categories. These categories define the universe of sustainability issues for the SASB. Those 26 categories are split into 5 pillars: so environment, social, human capital, business model, and leadership and governance. So each top, then we would look into the scope of the 77 industries. We also have our own classification system that groups companies a little bit differently from traditional classification systems, taking into account ESG risk and opportunities that are more similar within those industries. And then after that, we try to define industry-specific sustainability topics with industry-specific sustainability metrics. And each of those metrics, we would try to think how performance on that metric would drive value through either revenue or cost or impact on assets or liabilities or cost of capital. And based on the topic or the industry, those impacts may be very different. And that kind of understanding what are the key value drivers for each industry, it helps us determine what are those metrics that are likely to be useful for investors. So this format is a little bit different from how companies used to report sustainability data. So we really want to make sure that investors that usually digest this information in the format of, through Bloomberg Terminal, using Excel spreadsheets, we try to provide this communication tool to bring companies and investors on the same page. And this slide kind of shows. We have some echo in there. Hello? Okay, I think that should be better. So this slide will kind of show how we envision this information when SASB standards are adopted and information is available to investors. Then you would be able to log into a Bloomberg Terminal, for example, and do a peer comparison on the same metrics with consistent units of measures. And this peer comparison would allow, for example, active asset managers to do stock picking and decide winners and losers. We actually do see some companies already disclosing SASB information even in their SEC filings. So there's a couple examples from the few real estate investment trusts that report information in a stable format. So that's already becoming a reality. And then when this information becomes available, this is some type of analysis that investors could do, because better data leads to better investment analysis, and you would be able to do adjustments to their traditional valuation models and types of research that they do in incorporating these performance on ESG factors and either adjust it in a positive or a negative format. So then, kind of like in terms of, just to give a couple examples, how we think about the research and identifying these indicators. So the first example everybody probably knows about is the Chipotle case, the food safety issues that the company had a couple of years ago. And at that point, when this the scandal happened, the outbreak, there were a lot of questions about SASB. SASB was actually in the media. Journalists and investors were asking whether SASB data would be able to help identify some issues. And we did have provision at that point. We had provisional standards, and the food safety was, of course, identified as material topic for the restaurants industry. And some of the metrics that we had there carried some forward-looking value to them, and would be able to help investors identify some of the risks that the company might have had. But unfortunately, because there was a lot of the lack of disclosure on that topic, that kind of left investors a little bit in the dark. The second case was also pretty interesting. It's about the truck manufacturing companies and the air emissions regulations. So in the early 2010, 2011, I think the EPA was developing, came up with stricter regulations for neutron carbon oxide emissions from heavy-duty truck engines. And at that point, before the regulation hit, Navistar had I think the most market share for the trucks. But as the regulation was coming in place, Navistar was kind of lagging in terms of making improvements to their engines, unlike their competitors that were actually doing some changes to their engines ahead of the regulations. It helped their competitors to gain the market share, and you can see that Navistar's market share declined because they were not able to meet those regulations. And again, of course, it was a hit on the company's stock performance, but having disclosure on these specific metrics that SASB did have in the standards would give investors enough information to not to be guessing about whether a company is going to meet regulations or not, to actually see that data and make an informed decision. There are also, of course, examples from the real estate where performance of some of these metrics that actually are included in SASB standards can help identify the value creation for the real estate industry. So in terms of kind of best practices, kind of how this can be all used in your work that you're doing with investments, there are some resources that might be helpful. SASB has been publishing in the last couple of years several editions of the investment integration insights, where we have some case studies from mainstream investors using SASB standards specifically in their work and how they make decisions. So, Nordea Asset Management in their economic value add strategy uses SASB standards to identify companies that are likely to be, better performers. UBS as well uses SASB standards in their fundamentals. So this is all about active management. Some of that is you can see from the slides that it's not, just fundamental thinking. A lot of it is quantitative, and that's kind of why SASB standards, 3/4 of our metrics are quantitative, because we do recognize that a lot of this analysis is done using quantitative models, using Excel spreadsheets, rather than just by reading qualitative disclosures and making kind of adjustments on top of their models. So a lot of the SASB data is also used by other data providers. So, for example, True Value Labs developed their Insight 360 tool, where they use SASB framework to identify early indicators of performance through media mentions. So they do a screening for keywords. They use machine learning and AI in identifying news articles that discuss specific SASB, material SASB topics for specific industries, and assess whether a company is performed in a positive way or in a negative way. And they've been doing some backtesting as well, and show that it does have predictive value and is helpful for determining future stock performance of these companies. So the SASB also can be helpful if you go to the SASB website. We have the materiality map that kind of puts all these general categories and industries on one page, and helps you see like a big picture of risks and opportunities in your portfolio. It gives you a high-level view on all the SASB topics and where these risks lie in your portfolio at the industry level. So that might be very helpful for you to look at. So overall, kind of this we do see a lot of support for SASB framework. It's not that we just developed it in isolation. We have a lot of some of the mainstream investors see a lot of value in SASB. We do have support from our investor advisory group, which includes which has a representation from asset owners and asset managers with total of more than 30 trillion of assets under management. We also see a lot of uptake from companies using SASB standards. So it's the way they use standards, there is some range there. Some of the best examples I think is the JetBlue report, and as well as the disclosures from those real estate investment trusts that I mentioned earlier. It's also the where this information can be found if you were to be looking for some SASB disclosure. A lot of it in corporate responsibility reports, but it also can be found in the SEC filings as well from some companies. And it's also the other thing is that it's, although SASB was founded in the U.S. and initially we were thinking of this as a more like focus for the U.S. market, we do see a lot of uptake from European and Asian companies and investors in terms of the adoption and using SASB standards in disclosure and in investment decisions. And just to wrap up with the presentation, I also want to show a few things in you guys doing your research and analysis. One thing is to show the slides, but the other thing is actually to show some tools that you might find helpful, or like the way you can think about this are more Excel spreadsheets. So if you have access to the Bloomberg terminal, you may want to download this spreadsheet. It can be found through xltpxesg command. What we did is, with the help of people at Bloomberg, we mapped our standards, provisional standards at that point, to the Bloomberg data points that are available. So here in the top, you would just select SASB, and then you would type in a ticker here, and the format of the template will change depending on the company and the industry the company is. And you will see the SASB provisional standards for that specific industry, what metrics we have in the standard, and then there would be a mapping of the proxies from the Bloomberg terminal. And if you have a Bloomberg connected to it, the data will be populated. So that might be helpful for you to kind of collect some data that is available on the market. It's not perfect, but somewhere to start. Here are a few models that I personally been working on a few years ago when I was just trying to think through what are the most useful metrics and how these metrics would be applied in modeling and making the investment decisions. So this one specifically is for the REITs, and basically you would think like how the valuation of the REIT traditionally works, and then I would include some of the pieces of evidence showing that improving energy efficiency or water efficiency in their portfolios drives so much impact, has so much impact on utility costs or occupancy rate, right? And then I would make certain adjustments using there are formulas here that would make adjustments to the line items in the model, and then that would kind of help you see what is the actual impact going to be, and in the end on the share price or net asset value, right? So just kind of puts this data in the actual like numbers and dollar amounts. The other one I worked on was the oil and gas model. There's a lot of going on here. It's more complicated, but the main idea is kind of thinking through a lot of the modeling for the oil and gas companies, exploration and production specifically, comes from the value of their reserves. And I was trying to model through how climate change risk and impact on stranded assets may impact the value of those reserves, the cost of extraction of the reserves, cost of capital for these companies, so on and so forth. And then in the end, then you end up kind of like looking into the impact on share price, because the value of reserves is basically what drives the valuation of the exploration and production company. So that's it from me. So now I guess we can open to the discussion.
Great. Thank you so much, Anton. So does anyone in the group have questions about any of that and how it may be applicable to your work?
Hi, Anton. This is Asla Jolo from Bryant University. We have a student managed fund, and we do ESG integration. So these valuations models that you just showed us are great. So we can actually see direct impact of ESG on the stock price, share price, the way you model it. Are those available also through Bloomberg, or is this your work through SASB that we cannot reach them most probably?
Yeah, that's something I created myself. I can ask. I don't know if I would be able to share these, but overall, I think the Bloomberg has a function where you can download some traditional models, and I think that's how I started. I would download a template and then just think through where should I incorporate additional line items with the SASB metrics.
Okay. So students actually can do this exercise. I guess if I develop template, I'm the professor, and then they can kind of look at the least scenario analysis, right? If this happens, and how it would impact the share price of a company in maybe one industry.
Yeah. So and the other thing probably worth mentioning, right? There's more art than science to it. SASB also, we want to. There is a lot of there is kind of like a misconception sometimes there on the market that we are this rating agency that we know how this data must be used, and this is the impact, and this is the company is doing better or worse. We want to demystify that. We're not in a position to say that this is how it needs to be used. This is and we don't do any rating based on performance. This is all for for the market, and then of course asset managers or companies like MSCI, Sector Analyst, then they will do some value add on top of it, and they may have other theories on how this is used. So this is more just like an example of like my personal view on how some of these data points might be used, and it's completely fair that someone else might think that no, I don't agree. I think this is the other way that it can be used.
No, I totally agree. MSCI or Sustainalytics, we have also their reports. We subscribe to both of them. They don't provide valuations. Am I right? They provide just reports, ESG rankings in the industry, or in the peer group, so based on their definition of peer group or the sector or the industry, and then the detailed reports. But it would be for the learning purposes, for students to see an Excel and then seeing an impact of one of the material factors, as you said, how it could actually impact its share price is also important, because we use a lot of Excel worksheets for valuation, right? For discounted cash flow, relative valuation. So this would be a good exercise also for them to think about it. So of course, this is not, as you said, this is art and science together. There is no one, correct one, or there are many of them. So that's the reason we have buyers and sellers in the market. But it would be interesting also if you make this eventually available for the industry, for maybe educational institutions. It would be great to look at these Excels.
Yeah, I agree. Some of the flaws that we hear about the MSCI and others is that there's lack of transparency into how their ratings are determined. And also, I think a lot of that is sometimes they kind of ignore the fact how companies actually manage issues. They more take it from the standpoint of the exposure to something. But exposure does not necessarily mean that there is a good management around that exposure. So there's some, but I completely agree that in having this raw data out there and then give people an opportunity to kind of play with it and make their own determinations, and it doesn't prevent MSCI or others to also do something with it and then result in a rating, but having raw data is also important.
Thank you. This was an excellent presentation. Thank you, Anton.
Anton, this is Alice. SASB also has a navigator or some sort of navigator tool. I think there's some costs associated with that, but can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a standards navigator tool. There is a cost associated. I don't know if maybe some universities, some of the people who are on the call, their schools already have access. I'm not aware, but it's a great tool to. So there are many different things that that it can provide. First is that, of course, there's just a view of the standards in a little bit different format rather than just a PDF. It's more, interactive. There are various filters. Then there is a company disclosure analysis available. So it's a disclosure intelligence app where we use artificial intelligence, machine learning algorithms to right now, the source of the disclosure is the EDGAR, so it's SEC filings, so 10K, 20Fs, and 40Fs specifically. But we use this algorithms to search for the level of disclosure on each of the topics that are determined to be material by the SASB. And you can do peer comparison for the quality of disclosure. So again, it's quality of disclosure, not quality of performance or management. So it's purely do companies report SASB topics. Some of them already report metrics. In terms of the quality of disclosure, we right now they provide kind of rating based on not the rating, but like the categorization, whether it's a boilerplate type of disclosure, whether it's a company tailored narrative, which is a more useful type of disclosure, or whether companies disclose some of the metrics as well. So it may not necessarily mean that it's a SASB metrics, but at least there are some proxies that disclosed by companies. So that's a helpful tool. Additionally, the Navigator gives you access to some evidence, supporting evidence, which means our process is evidence-based. So we want to make sure that each topic has a backup from the standpoint of, either quantitative or qualitative analysis showing why it is relevant. So some of that can be also seen on the Navigator. Additionally, there is some information regarding our vision, so like a SASB perspective on how each topic is likely to be linked to traditional channels of financial impact. So, there would be a tag whether this topic is likely to impact revenue or costs or assets or liabilities. So it is a pretty helpful tool. I think if you do have access to it, it may give you a lot of insight and kind of drive your research in the right direction. So I would recommend if there is a chance that you can get access to it somehow, it would definitely be helpful in doing research.
Thanks, Anton. And is there also there used to be on the SASB website a place I think you could put in a ticker symbol, and I think what came out was what industry and what the metrics were that were pertinent to that stock. Is that right?
Yeah. So determining the classification, it is available through the website. It's just kind of help companies because standards are the public good. They are available for free. And to help you identify which is likely to be the most relevant standard, you would type your ticker and see which industry that company is. Right now, unfortunately, we provide only primary industry classification. So let's say if it's JP Morgan, the company is involved in 5 different industries within the financial sector. But if you type the ticker, it will only show, I think, either commercial banks or investment banking. So then you will need to think a little bit, okay, maybe there are other standards that will apply. And then the other tool that I showed on the slides that is available for free is the materiality map. So you can find it on our website, I think under the standards portion of the site. And it kind of will give you a high-level view of all 77 industries, and you will see general issue categories on the left. So the difference between general issue category and the disclosure topic, in the sense that general issue categories, as I was saying earlier on the presentation, kind of define the universe of sustainability issues at the high level and just provide this sustainability framework. And then within each general issue category, there would be different sustainability topics that are more industry specific to that industry. So general issue category is broader, and then disclosure topics are more narrow that would be mapped to a single general issue category. And then you would be able to see at the high level, okay, for example, for the general issue category of product design and lifecycle management, which is under business model innovation, what are the disclosure topics that occur for each of those 77 industries? Some of them will be blank, which will mean that we have not identified any material topics for that general issue category in an industry. some of them will have one or sometimes even two disclosure topics. So that's also a useful tool. The way we kind of see in a more in terms of more like in-depth use of it, and it's not available on our website, but maybe with time, is essentially if an asset owner or an asset manager uploads their holdings in all their portfolio to this tool, it would give you kind of a view of where specific risks are in the portfolio and to what extent. So if you also upload their positions in terms of, what's your exposure to the energy sector, what's your exposure to financial sector, that will help you to kind of then highlight within the portfolio where those risks lie and to what magnitude as well. So I would recommend looking just at the materiality map. You can also, if you click through each cell, it will pop up the name of the disclosure topic, and it will also show the metrics that are in the standard as well.
Thank you.